So blues for Alice soloing. So soloing over blues for Alice, one of the pieces of advice that you always hear, and in my own videos as well, is, you know, when you're practicing soloing over a tune, you've got to hit your chord tones, you've got to be able to find your chord tones. And the problem with that is then when you try and solo, is your solos sound like chord tone practice. Now, for me, being able to hit your chord tones, being able to outline the chords, it's an essential foundation. It's a stepping stone to be able to improvise. So it is a place you need to be, and it might be where you need to start. But what I thought I'd do today with Blues for Alice is do a little soloing etude, which is kind of like showing you how you can take these chord tones into the realm of more musical soloing ideas. In a second I'm going to play my chord tone etude for you, and then I'm going to break it down into how you can kind of make things a little bit more musical with variation in rhythm, superimposing other chord tones, and chromaticism chiefly. So I'll put the music on the screen. As ever, you can grab the tab and notation from my website jazzguitarwithandy.com. Check the description beneath. If you want to understand how the chords are working, that is very important when you're trying to work with a song like this. So check out my previous video if you missed that. So let's break it down. I'll break it down sort of chunks of 2 bars or so. So the first 2 bars. So what we've got going on there. So we're doing an F major 7 chord first. So those are all chord tones. So what I'm doing is I'm starting on the 7th E, descending the arpeggio, which is just a simple way to avoid, you know, just always going. And we're starting on the and of 1 as well. Instead of going like, you know, 1 and 2 and, we're going 1 and then a triplet after the first note. 1 and 2 triplet, da 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 da. And this bit down here is going 7 5 1. Sorry, 7 5 3 1 7 beneath the root 3 root. So it's all chord tones, but you get the descent, and then we go down on the suspension, and then go back up and back. So it's not a line which is just like an arpeggio, which just goes up or down. It's got movement up and down within it, which creates a little bit more interest. We then get the E minor 7 flat 5 to A7, where we have, and this is very simple. We are just ascending an arpeggio in order here. This is a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, E, G, B flat, D. Now the next chord's A7. I could jump to an A like that or there, but the nice thing to practice with when working with chord tones is to go to the nearest note of the next chord. And if we're going E, G, B flat, D, the nearest note of an A7 chord is C sharp, semitone beneath. When you get these chords moving in fourths, if you're on the 7, the third of the next chord will be beneath it, like that. And then we're descending an A7, but from the third, so it's going 3, 1, 7, 5, C sharp, A, G, E, giving us so far 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And it's quite nice to do a slide. I didn't notate that on the music, but just to make it flow into each other. Now the next 2 bars are D minor 7, G7, C minor 7, F7. So we're going. So what we're doing here, we're going up an arpeggio. We're going up the D minor 7 in order. Going down like we did a second ago to the third of the G7. Now we're going to do something different here. We're going 3, 3, 1, 5. Then this note is out of key, D flat. That's a chromatic note. And you really want to place chromatics on the weaker part of the beat, so on the and, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You want to place your chord tones on the strong part of the beat, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Any chromaticism, ideally place it on the and. So what's that D flat there for anyway? It's because the next chord is a C, so we can do a nice fall into the next chord, and we're going to do the same idea on this chord. which is, you know, when you get the same chord movements, you can do this kind of thing, and then your lines have a link between them because you're doing similar things. It's the same line down a tone. So we go D minor 7, G7, chromatic note, C minor 7 down to descendant F7, but then we have that B there, which you can tell it sounds out of key, but it sounds fine when you play this next note, B flat. The G and the F chord, we're not playing the 7th, we're descending a G triad. B, D, so B, G, D, so that's a G triad. We're going 3, 1, 5, C minor 7 arpeggio, then 3, 1, 5 of F7, of F, sorry. Giving us. Nice flowing 8th note lines, and the triplet at the start just has a little bit of variety, not starting on beat 1, a bit more interesting, bar 5 and 6. So on the B flat 7 we're going. So what's going on there? Well, we've got a whole, we've got a crotchet or a quarter note on the first beat, then we've got on the second beat a triplet. So a bit like the start with that triplet on the second beat, it's very typical of some of Charlie Parker's lines. But that is just an B flat 7 arpeggio going up, root, 3rd, 5, 7, flat 7, B flat, D, F, A flat. That triplet just makes it a little bit more interesting than going. And then we get, now you might hear that, that's not a B flat 7 arpeggio, but it is an arpeggio. Now, one thing Parker definitely did is he played other chord tones or other chords over the top of chords, so superimposing on top, and this is an example of that. This is a D minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio over the top of a B flat 7. Now, if you've got a dominant chord, you can play a minor 7 flat 5 chord built off the 3rd. So B flat 7 being B, B flat, D, F, A flat, the 3rd is D, we can play a D minor 7 flat 5 chord over it. Take a C7 chord, the 3rd is E, so you could play an E minor 7 flat 5 chord over it. Why does it work? Well, it's because of the intervals, whereas this is a D minor 7 flat 5 chord, so this chord, the notes against the B flat 7, well, it's got a lot of the notes of a B flat 7. It's D is the 3rd of B flat, F is the 5th, A flat's the flat 7. So just those first 3 notes of this D minor 7 flat 5 is a rootless B flat 7. And the C is a 9th, a very sweet sounding note against this. So one thing you can do over a dominant chord is you can play a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio built off the 3rd, and what it gives you the sound of a dominant 9th chord without the root. For those of you that know your blues well, like T-Bone Walker would use this chord, which you might know as B minor 7 flat 5, but it can replace a G7 and it makes a G9 sound without a G in the bass, although you could add a G in the bass, but that is a sort of bluesy chord. So these things are quite useful to know. So we've got B flat 7, but with some, you know, the triplet coming in, then the D minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, which makes it sound like a B flat 9. We then get the B flat minor 7 to E flat 7, where I've got that line. Now what am I doing here? What am I thinking? Well, one thing you can do when you've got quick 2/5s, now the quick 2/5 is when you get a 2/5 in one bar, like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, like we have a lot in this tune. When chords are moving that quickly, you can't think of every chord sometimes. Like I was in the first line, I was like, I am thinking of every chord there. If you do that, it gets a bit busy sometimes, all the time. So one thing you can do is, when there's a 2/5, you can either ditch the 2 or ditch the 5. So you could either think B flat minor 7 there, or you could think E flat 7. In this instance, I'm thinking E flat 7. You can hear it's kind of bluesy. That's right. And what are the intervals? It's D flat twice, B flat, which is that's the 7th, sorry, the D flat of E flat. The B flat is the 5th. The A flat's a passing note. G's the 3rd. Then we go back to D flat. It's kind of like a little riff. I see. And some of those notes obviously are found within a B flat minor, so that's why you can avoid forgetting about it, because D flat is the 3rd of B flat. B flat's obviously the root, and the A flat is the flat 7, so they're notes within the chord pretty much. But in my head for E's, I'm just thinking E flat 7. So instead of like, I'm just thinking of one chord. The next bar is an A minor 7 to a D7, and I'm just going to take that same line down. B because then it gives some nice repetition and continuity between the as the chords move. So as the line so far. Quite nice to like accent that last note, or even the first note. You know, think about how you articulate these things as well. There's a little slide there you can do. Quite cool. And the last bar of that line sounds a bit odd without the chords. That note you can hear stands out. And it doesn't make sense till you play the next note. So that's taking that same idea that I've just done, but instead of going again, because it might get a bit too much repetitive, I'm going back on myself back up to this, this note here. Now my next chord in the next bar is a G minor 7, and it's always good to land on a third on beat 1 because they really do define what a chord is. You know, the third makes a chord major or minor, so it's always a good note to start on a chord, particularly on a minor chord. And what we get here is B A at the end of the bar, which is a chromatic enclosure of the next note. So this whole end of this line is about getting to that B flat in a smooth way, like that. So that whole line being. Played the first note of the next line. And we've reached the final line. We've got a whole bar of G minor 7. We get this. First 4 notes. So what we've got going on here, there's a bit of superimposition here. We have got, a bit like when we had the D minor 7 flat 5 over the B flat 7, you can play a major 7 arpeggio built off the third of a minor chord. So if you've got a G minor 7, the notes are G, B flat, D and F. So that third was B flat. So instead of going for the predictable G minor 7, you could go for a B flat major 7, which is this, which is B flat, D, F, A. And whenever you're doing these chords on top of chords, it's all about, well, that's no longer a B flat major 7. It's a very structured thing. It's going in distances of thirds, so it's very strong to the ear. But over the top of a G minor 7, it's not a B flat major 7. These notes, whereas that's B flat, D, F, A, whereas that's a B flat major 7 over a G minor chord, or a G minor 7 chord, it's third, 5th, 7, 9. So that's a G minor 9 sound. So that sounds cool. And then I've got here at the end, we've got a chromatic approach of a G minor triad. So it's all about G minor, but making it a little bit more interesting. The last line goes like this. And it's all about closing off strongly, convincingly, finishing on that F, and I'm actually excuse me, superimposing a chord here again. So I'm thinking, instead of just C7, F, I'm thinking C7, F sharp 7, F. Why F sharp 7? Well, F sharp 7 is a tritone of C, so over a C7 you can play F sharp 7, and it sounds pretty cool. So we got this line over the C7, which is flat third, third, root 7th. So the bluesy minor third over a dominant, you know, very quintessential blues thing to do, is then done to the F sharp 7 in the same way. It's the equivalent line for the F sharp 7 basically. But what it ends up with at the end is da da da, which we had earlier with the B flat, and it's a chromatic enclosure of the F, which also sounds super strong if you do a chromatic enclosure of a target note. Very convincing end. So that's my breakdown of that, and that when I sat down to write that sort of etude, that took me 5 minutes to write out. Why? Because I've worked really intently on chord tones and getting them down. And as much as people will say, oh, just playing chord tones and going through the emotions with your arpeggios, it's not very musical, but it's an essential foundation that I don't think you can get away from. And I think you need to remember that when you're listening to a play, you're listening to layers upon layers of things they've built upon. And one of those things you need to build upon is good knowledge of chord tones, good application of them, being able to hear them. I did that all, worked that all out by sound rather than sort of academically. And I've had to sort of think it through after what I came up with. And if you're thinking about ways to practice your chord tones, and that's what it comes down to, then check out some of my videos on like arpeggios. I'll put 2 in the description. about the arpeggio pivot of Barry Harris and the, you know, other ways to practice arpeggios as well. And I think that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, you know, this F major 7, being able to hear it, being able to access it from the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, being able to connect your lines by the nearest notes. So if you go F, A, C, E and your next chord is E minor 7 flat 5, what's the nearest note that you could go to? How can you make a smooth transition between them? And I think also it's also about knowing when to tweak what you're doing. If you find yourself just playing your arpeggios going up in order and things like that, then and you can do it technically and you know what you're playing and you can hear it and you can find it on the fretboard easily, at some point you've got to take a leap and tweak what you're doing, and check out some of my other videos in respects to that, and I'll put some on the screen now. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, and my name's Andy. If you've not been here before, thank you for stopping by my channel. Please consider subscribing for jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday and Saturday. You guys take care, and I'll see you next time.